Hey everyone, welcome to the Stride to Freedom podcast. My name is Russell Benaroya, and I'm the co-founder of Stride Services, a virtual back-office bookkeeping and accounting firm serving hundreds of clients around the United States. This podcast is designed to help small business owners focus on growth and innovation. In other words, focus on those things that inspired you to start your business in the first place. We call it your Genius Zone. We do our job on this podcast when business owners feel like they have the trust and confidence to build the right team of partners around them that will help them grow. Thanks for joining. Let's go. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Stride to Freedom podcast, where we help business leaders get and stay in their genius zone. What's your genius zone? It's your superpower. It's what you do that feels effortless to you, where you're at your best, where people wonder, how are you so capable? It is where you feel free. My name's Russell Benaroya, and I'm your host of the podcast. And this podcast is brought to you by Stride Services. As you probably already know, we're an outsourced bookkeeping and accounting firm with the express purpose of helping people with a thirst for continuous improvement achieve their highest and best use. And our highest and best use is helping business owners use data to make better business decisions. And we typically do that for outsourced IT services firms, marketing agencies, and consulting firms. I am off the hook excited today to welcome Jamison West to the podcast. Hey, Jamison.
Hello.
So nice to have you here. Jamison and I met many years ago at an entrepreneurs organization event, and I just knew that we would cross paths again. Jamison has a certain energy, a certain presence, a certain magnetism about him. And I said, I know I'm going to see this guy again. I didn't know it was going to be on a podcast, but who knows, right? But today we're all up in each other's business on a bunch of fronts, a couple that we'll talk about today. But the reason that I wanted to bring Jamison on was twofold. The first is Jamison's coming out with a new book, and we're going to talk about the book. It's super relevant for business owners, and I'm excited to dive in. Jamison is also on his third or fourth act as an entrepreneur, and he's the co-founder of a company called ConnectStrat that helps business leaders in the IT services space plan for and achieve their dreams. So what do you say we rock and roll?
Let's do it.
Okay, awesome. So what is something, Jamison, that I can celebrate with you that you're just really excited about right now?
I think one thing just struck me that I'm excited about is you and I have got all these like funny connection points, like in odd timing with like EO, serial entrepreneurs. And we're always having these conversations about, wow, keeps connecting. And you what I realized, and I read it, but then I just heard you do it again, is one of my favorite things to talk to people about is their genius zone. And I use that exactly, like literally the exact thing. Now, I don't know if it's because we were at the same event in EO Seattle at where you had to break out and discover your genius zone. It was a facilitated exercise. I think it was in Portland 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And I've never forgot. It was probably one of my favorite things I've ever done. And so I think that for me, it's celebrating that I know I'm in a place right now where I feel like I'm in my highest and best use and living my genius zone. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, awesome. You're a busy guy. I can tell. You've got buzzers coming everywhere.
I do not know what that is.
Oh, it sounds like it's a Skype invite.
I don't use that. So
everybody should know. People are trying to get a hold of Jamison, so we are honoring this hour together. Okay, what is something, Jamison, we can empathize with you on that is kind of draining your energy right now?
Wow. Well, I think right now I've got a few things draining my energy. I think that, I'm always trying to pay attention to that and kind of purge those types of things. So I think the main thing that I could talk about that has kind of been a bit much for me is I am currently running 3 businesses, which is a lot. And I work extremely heavily as a subcontractor and coach, and one of them is ConnectStrat. So a little bit along with being the president of the Entrepreneurs Organization of Las Vegas right now. So I kind of feel like I have 5 jobs, which is about 4 too many. So a little bit draining, but definitely working with intention on mitigating that so that I enter 2022 a little more refreshed and with more energy than I feel like I've had over the last 6 months. So a little overwhelmed, but doing some good work to mitigate that.
We can empathize. I'm sure we can all empathize. Getting back to your genius zone, let's talk a little bit about that and how you've applied that to the businesses that you're involved with today. You're in so many ways a legend in the outsourced IT services or MSP market. You've built a couple of companies. You've exited some companies. You do not tend to stop. You want to help other entrepreneurs achieve their dreams. Where does all this come from for you, and why are you so clear that yes, this is your genius, this is your superpower?
Yeah, I think, and this will be really kind of relevant, I think, to some of the rest of what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. The opportunity to, kind of look back, I think I've probably had 8 or 9 businesses. I had a main business in the course of my professional career, a main business. Mm-hmm. And there's so much that you learn on your first big go round and exit, many pieces of which were not my genius zone. And I think that's natural, right? And then what happens is you get this opportunity once you sell or exit that business to kind of go into act 2. And act 2 for me doesn't mean like per business, but it's just kind of act 2 of my professional career. Mm-hmm. So I'm in the same vertical. I'm working with a lot of the same people. I've been fortunate to have made incredible relationships and just kind of gained a bit of a reputation in the area that I appreciate and I'm thankful for. But I was also able to enter my second act with intention, right? So much easier for me to get involved, and there's opportunity galore around me right now, but I get to pick and choose those things that I get passionate. So it keeps my energy high. I'm a naturally very high energy person. And now when I get to apply it against the things that are in my genius zone, that's a beautiful thing. I don't get mired in the minutia of stuff that I realized I could do, but didn't truly enjoy or have passion around. So
how would you characterize your GZ? How would you characterize your GZ?
For me, I realized, so I went to the University of Washington, Foster School of Business. I am not an E-Myth entrepreneur. I'm actually my uncle was a massive entrepreneur. I can go way, I'm telling old stories, but I think I was in 7th grade when my dad asked me what I was going to do. And I said, I'm going to graduate from the University of Washington Business School in June of 1992. And then I'm going to go on to own United Graphics, which is where my uncle, and I'm going to go on to own this business. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Well, I did graduate that month from the Foster School of Business. I was told, you'll change your mind 100 times between now. That's 10 years away. Yeah. I did not. I stuck with it. But an E-Myth entrepreneur, is like that technician that finds themselves owning a business. And 95% of the IT services people I work with are E-Myth entrepreneurs. They're actually engineers at heart that became business owners, and they've had to learn that through experience. I was a little different. My genius zone was really around people. I love managing, working with people and leaders. I realized that kind of background I had, and maybe a little bit of that kind of natural EQ that exists there. I love to help people, especially in leadership positions, get stronger. And then really finance is my other, the numbers just kind of click in the back of my head. So I've been the CFO of pretty much every company I've been involved with. It's kind of the last role I let go because it's what I'm so naturally inclined to do.
And then you built a business most recently, or in the last year or so, called ConnectStrat, which seems purpose-built to help you express all of this learning and creativity and energy in service to helping managed service providers achieve their dreams and find their zone and be successful. Talk about that vessel of ConnectStrat and what it's doing for you and doing for the community.
It's interesting. I talk about intention, but there was a little bit of accidental in there as well. But that's part of what we are, right? Yeah,
always a little accidental, always a little bit of luck, right? Like you are a lucky person. Yeah.
I mean, so the background of ConnectStrat is really interesting. I'd sold my IT services business in Seattle and moved to Las Vegas about 4.5 years ago. I co-founded, I've since taken the CEO role of a company. I helped co-found a SaaS company called Smileback, and I helped co-found a company called Teamatics and another one called TimesThis. So I've kind of got these 3 software companies going. I'm not involved with Teamatics anymore. So that's kept me busy, but it wasn't earning me the kind of income that I needed.
Mm-hmm.
So I began consulting with leaders on the side using primarily the EOS methodology, entrepreneurial operating system methodology. And I was working kind of with people here somebody really wants to reach me, sorry.
Yeah, we know we're talking about
That
popular
is.
guy.
I never get calls on Teams, so I'm like, what's going on? I couldn't even figure it out for a So what I did is I started helping people kind of using their methodology, which just clicked for me. I'd leveraged scaling up in my IT services business from Vern Harnish, and then kind of switched to Traction EOS from Gino Wickman. And I love building putting a process and a system, really is a better term for it, into your business. It just, E-Myth entrepreneurs need that, but I think every entrepreneur needs that. So I was thinking about the systems. But I was really being very horizontal in the local area here in Las Vegas, just helping some friends in EO and some others. And I kind of had this epiphany late 2019 that, all of these IT service providers, it was growing, it was becoming more popular. EOS was kind of exploding in the industry. And I said, there's these, who do I go to? I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm in San Francisco. And who do I go to? And it's like, well, I don't know. Who are the local people who can help you? And can they spell MSP? And more often than not, there wasn't somebody local who was focused on it. And really the whole nature of what that is doesn't focus on a vertical. And I kind of went back to my own coaching and counseling and said, let's create a consortium of people who do this type of work focused on this vertical. And very, very rapidly, it turned from a marketing consortium into, wait a minute, this is a real opportunity to create a legit firm. And that's kind of the luck piece. The other luck piece in all of this is we immediately said, in order to do that, we can't have these coaches work purely within their geographic area. I can't have 10 MSP clients in Las Vegas, right? It's competitive. It's uncomfortable. So let's figure out how to deliver these services virtually. And this was 2 months before the pandemic hit. So we had put all these systems in place and started coaching people virtually predominantly. And then COVID hit, and there was a little pushback from clients, and then the pandemic hits and the pushback goes away. So our firm over 2020 just really exploded. And we figured out we already knew how to talk to the industry, but now we knew how to deliver and refine what we wanted to deliver virtually. And the timing couldn't have been better. So that's the luck component.
So if I am an IT services owner, what am I walking into? Well, what am I feeling prior to engaging a ConnectStrat? What am I walking into when I engage with ConnectStrat? And what is my desired result as a function of having a coach through ConnectStrat? Kind of walk us through the journey.
Yeah. So here's what we found. And this was really, it began as an understanding of what EOS does well and completely misses out on, right? Like all of us more entrepreneurial coaches were like, wow, this is missing some significant parts. It's beautiful what it is, but it's missing some major components. So we began talking to our clients and asking you hire somebody to help you with strategy, you do some analysis through peer groups, you're an EO, maybe you've hired an EOS person, you put all these pieces together. No one of them is holistic. And what they're feeling is this disconnect between what they want, how they run their business, how they get their leadership team on board and everybody else aligned and start with intent saying, what are the outcomes that I want? And driving materially towards those outcomes within the business. When we assess where they're at, each one of these areas is maybe at 20 or 30% of where it should be. right? It's overwhelming to step back and say, there's all this stuff going on. I'm not a trained entrepreneur. I'm an E-Myth entrepreneur. I'm an engineer trying to get a bunch of people to, and some of these companies, they've grown to $10 million in revenue run by an engineer who has no business background and is amazing at what they do, but they're missing significant components and they don't really have the background to build those out. So as coaches, what we've done is like take a step back and think about, from an entrepreneurial perspective, what do you want out of this? Why are you here? Why did you build this? What's the purpose? Financially is certainly a component of it, but it's not just the finance. Like, what do you want? Why did you build it? And what's the outcome? How do you move yourself from having a job, working for the business, and then making the business work for you, right? And so we spend time in kind of this life legacy mentality. We call it Founders Day, and we just talk to the owner, founder, and really dig into those questions, get to know them deeply. So we have 4 pillars. Our first pillar is what we call the impact pillar, and it's all about that kind of life legacy. What's the impact personally, family, community? What's the impact that the owner wants to have through this vessel of their organization? And then we move into the leadership team and we begin and we want to translate from the owner, what's the vision you have and how do we get your executive leadership team aligned and clear so that you're all really clear what that North Star is. What's your behave? How do you want to behave? What's the culture that you want to define? Because I think as entrepreneurs, we have the good fortune to do what we want to do with the people we want to do it with. It's kind of one of the reasons we become entrepreneurs. When you're an employee, sometimes you have to pick your employer around that, but you get to design that as the entrepreneur and owner. It's a beautiful thing. And then the other 2 pillars, so that's our vision pillar. Then we move into the strategy pillar. What are you uniquely different at? Where's the industry going? How are you going to get there? How do you mitigate kind of SWOT type work? How do we kind of make sure we're mitigating risks and doing all the things we need to do to be relevant long-term? How many business owners in the IT services space, like it's just massive, who are heads down, focused on the work at hand and don't see security or cloud coming at them as a massive change in what they need to do. And they're not being strategic about how they're going to approach it and get ahead of that wave. And then fourth, and finally is what we call our execution pillar, which is essentially looks a lot like EOS. Like, how do we get annual goals, quarterly rocks? How do we just execute against that strategy? Mm-hmm. So that's our holistic thing. And really at the end of the day, we're coaches. So we're teaching them but we coach them constantly through that process. And it just gives them somebody outside of their internal work circle to confide in and get accountability and coaching from, who kind of puts together this entire spectrum of what matters to them in the business and gives them confidence that they can increase their maturity level across each of those 4 pillars and grow towards, their intended place, whether that's an exit or an employee purchase or handing it off to one of their children or whatever it might look like. They now can work towards what that needs to look like with intent.
And what would you say are the 3 adjectives that express the feelings that a business owner has before they start working with you? Like, what's going on inside of them? What are those 3 words that are driving them to say, gosh, I want to do something different. I feel the need to do something different than what I have been doing. What are 3 adjectives?
So I always love trying to figure these ones out, but I would say uncertainty is
uncertainty. Yeah.
Uncertainty, fear.
Yeah.
And then just anxiety. We find that so many of our clients are coming, and when they first hire us, they're coming from a place of they have uncertainty about the future. They're fearful about all the risks that they're suddenly which is loss of employees and security right now, are huge topics in our industry, right? So there's fear about like, how well am I structured? Or could the rug be ripped out from me today? And almost all of our clients are suffering from that. Not all, but nearly all of them. And then that last one, just that anxiety over like, this is a stressful thing we do. Many are losing sleep at night, and they want to have that kind of extra layer of confidence and focus that they can move forward. So,
and fear is a very natural limbic system emotion, reptilian emotion, and the decision to work with a company like ConnectStrat is the courageous move when you have fear. You can be scared and you can retreat, or you can have courage and accelerate. And you're creating a path to acceleration, which I love. So now let's talk a little bit about how you are institutionalizing your legacy. So I want to move off ConnectStrat for a minute and talk about this book that you have written, The Emotional Side to Selling Your Small Business. You gave me the gift of an early look. So I got to learn about Alex and his journey. You wrote this wonderful fable of how somebody moves through the emotional side of considering selling their business. Talk a little bit about the book, where it came from for you, and what impact you want it to make.
Yes, well, thank you. First of all, I appreciate your support and all of this. It's been an interesting journey. When I sold my business, I owned it for 21 years up in Seattle, IT services business. I acquired 4 other IT services businesses. So I did a roll up from 2010 to 2012, and I sold in 2016. What I realized when I did that roll up is on the buy side, I got kind of maybe a little overly aggressive and excited about what I was building. And the last acquisition I didn't go well. And I won't get into any details, but it became very, very scary for me. And I almost lost the whole business. And it shocked my system. And I talked about that first part of our career, the second part of it, phase 2 of our professional career. This was the end of phase 1 for me. This was that impact of going, I'm not doing what I love doing. And I decided to sell. And fortunately, I was able to really recover from those acquisitions. I mean, an extremely profitable 2015, and timing felt right. I was very tired. So I spent 2014, 2015 really listening to some people who were interested in potentially acquiring. My ears opened up. People knew who I was. I built a good business, not a great business, but a good business. And so I went down the path of selling. And ultimately that culminated in a sale in March, April of 2016. What I realized in that journey were the advice, the people, the books, the education, everything that I had at my disposal to help me through that was about contracts and the P&L and valuations and the legality and tax implications. And it was all very business speak. It was very tactical. It was very financial, diligence, all of these components. Nobody told me to the depth that it hit me, the challenges I was going to have that had nothing to do with the value in the sale itself. Just going through that last 3 to 4, I mean, there was some excitement when I started doing it. It's like I'm going through the book. I don't mean to be, but there was this excitement in the idea. But from that moment where I got excited about, wow, I could actually have something of value here. And maybe I can do something new with my life and exit this and get somewhere else. But from that moment where I started to get excited and realize that could happen, to ink hitting paper and getting the check in my bank account was just a shocking set of, it was the biggest emotional roller coaster I've been on in my entire life. And when I was done, I'd been asked I've sat on some panels, I've spoke about it, I've been at conferences, and people kind of, I'm a very transparent person. I get that through EO. I'm a 1%er. Like I'm just going to overshare. And I started talking to people about how complicated and difficult. I didn't hide it. I was very, very open about it. And so I was asked to speak on it a fair amount. And then finally, my mentor, who also wrote the foreword for my book, Arlen Sorensen, said, hey, he kind of challenged me a little bit, and I told him, I think I'm going to write a book about this. And he goes, okay, you should do that. And then I kind of publicly said, I'm going to write a book about it. And I think it was the beginning of 2019. Whenever you say it publicly,
Oh yeah.
so it took me 2 extra years. I was supposed to there was a big event at the end of 2019. I'd hoped to, he said, do you have your book ready? We'll give out copies during their session. Here I am 2 years later, just published the book. So I failed to get it out in time, but just 2 years late. But that was the journey. I didn't feel there was a resource for people that addressed the money, the value, like all that kind of becomes obvious. There's a lot of resources. I didn't see a resource around the emotional components, and that's what I decided to share. And so the fable isn't my story necessarily. There's some pieces that might sound familiar to people who went through it, because I borrowed from that, but I borrowed from many others as well. And it's not just for the IT service. It happens to be an IT services, but it had nothing to do with. The journey is the same, no matter what kind of business you're in. When you go, an entrepreneur selling the baby you've raised is fraught with challenges that you didn't see coming.
What are you hoping that readers take away after absorbing the message of the book? What are you hoping for?
I hope that they can, again, we talk about intention versus action. My hope is that they can take the fable and the case studies and be vastly more prepared for that journey than they would be otherwise, to the degree that it kind of mitigates the negative emotions, that they can actually rise above that fray, have a list of non-negotiables before they go into it, so they don't get, you can really get, you can put yourself at an extreme disadvantage by becoming so emotionally invested in the outcome that you lose the purpose and the intent along the way, which I've seen happen so many times. You can be taken advantage of by a bad player, but if you can get ahead of all that and understand the pitfalls and set yourself, like, have a plan, because these are things that most people don't even see coming. So you're hit with it one day, and then you're emotionally reacting, and you don't have time to do what you could have done had you been prepared, right? So I just want to prepare people for the journey.
We had a guest on the show a couple of weeks ago, Randy Katz, from a firm called Synesis Advisors. So he's a mergers and acquisitions broker, and he's worked on many small businesses, certainly IT services included. And we talked specifically about IT services, and he challenged me, listeners on the call, to answer the question, what is the asset that you're selling? And being clear on that asset. And the distinction he drew was, hey, if the asset is you, not recommended, but if the asset is you and you're at the center and everything revolves around you and somebody's essentially buying you, and if it wasn't for you, the business wouldn't probably even be around, well, okay, notice that, be aware of that. If the asset that you're selling is something that transcends you, where you've built a machine that does not rely on you being at the center day to day, that's a vastly different asset that you're selling with a very different buyer pool that you're probably approaching. And I just thought that was really helpful for us as business owners to think about, what is this thing that I'm actually building and how am I creating value?
That's great.
Yeah, I thought it was cool.
Can I hit just a momentary pause in the?
Oh yeah. We'll pause you for a second and we'll come right back. No problem. Okay, we're back, and it's wonderful that life does not stop just because we're in a podcast. So great, awesome. So you're going to a big conference in a couple of weeks, IT Nation, which is ConnectWise's industry conference. You're a bit of a legend, I understand, and you probably have some speaking engagements there. For those that don't know what ConnectWise is, you can certainly explain it, but I'm curious what message you're hoping to deliver this year at IT Nation and the engagements that you've been invited to speak at.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fortunate enough to speak at a lot of industry events over the course of the year. I've been pretty deeply involved in the ConnectWise community. One thing I think that ConnectWise has done extraordinarily well is build community. It's something a lot of vendors try and fail to do well. It's kind of been there, from my opinion, from a partner perspective and now a vendor perspective. To me, that's been the difference maker in my time with them. I was fortunate enough to be on their advisory council for 10 years. I'm now an alumni of that, not there anymore. But I've been a speaker at IT Nation for about 12 years. It was formerly just called IT Nation. Now it's called Connect because they have IT Nations and they call their community.
Okay. Yeah.
So the IT Nation Connect conference is all about thought leadership. And it's really of their three conferences, it's the one that I'm most focused on because that's really what we're out there trying to do. We ConnectStrat will be running a series of, we have 5 speaking engagements. That is what we call the 5 Ps. So we walk through kind of operational maturity and helping business owners think through these issues. Perspective, which is kind of vision, strategy, execution. There's people, process. We get into all of these details, performance, and how they implement these components into their business. So at a highest level, it kind of runs them through the fundamentals of like, how do I get each of these things locked down or a little bit better in my business, and naturally relieves that anxiety and fear they have about running a more mature, solidified business. So we get a tremendous opportunity to share that. I also have the good fortune we've gotten involved with the Evolve peer groups, and we actually have a peer group where you must be a ConnectStrat client to be in that peer group. And so we're really working with them on our language, growth, and tension. And then finally, what's really fun, just a side little anecdote, I was a competitor on something called Pitch It that they put together. So they love to fund small startup software companies. And I was invited to be a judge for Pitch It about 3 years ago. It was very fun, a great winner. Somebody I knew won that competition. And was got $75,000 from ConnectWise, writes him a big check and says, go up, and it's untethered, go make do. Like it's a wonderful thing that they're kind of doing to give back to community. The next time I went to a conference, I was pitching a new company and we won. And that's how we funded TimeZest, which is one of my software companies, TimeZest, it does like calendaring in the IT services space, kind of like Calendly, but for the IT services space. And now I've been invited to come back as a judge again. So that's another thing that I get to do. I'm going to be a busy boy at the conference, but I really, it's like my year culminates usually in that conference. And then I go sleep for a month and all of a sudden it's Christmas. It's kind of
it's so nice to have you as part of this industry giving back the way that you are, which is awesome. What is one question that people don't usually ask you? Maybe they're intimidated or they just figure you have it all figured out, Jamison. What is a question people don't usually ask you that you wish they did, to share a little bit more about who you are?
I have, and I kind of mentioned this, I tend, and I think this probably comes from my coaching tendency, but I tend to get very transparent very quickly and ask a lot of questions as a coach. I push kind of hard. I'll ask questions that make people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And what I love is what that usually turns into, not always, is people finally get comfortable to ask me questions that they wouldn't have otherwise asked me. Because I find when you share from the heart, from a depth of like that, and when you're willing to ask those questions, they usually come back at you. I think I love when people ask when I've felt fear. And you're right. People have this expectation that I've done, but part of the reason that I get that transparent is because I need people to know I have made every mistake and continue to make most of them in my life, in my business. For whatever reason, I've just kind of put myself out there, and people have built this confidence around me, and all of us feel sometimes or question the deservedness they have around where they're positioned in life, right? So I love when people ask me questions around what's the worst fear that you have, not past. Like, where were you at? Like, people can ask me about my past and things I've run into. What about today? And I have all kinds of vulnerabilities and questions in my life and in my business and personally. And I'm going through it like this is a journey. There's no end to it. I'll never reach where I need to be. So I like when people get intentional about where my current, because I like to be, as a coach, I need a coach. And the most important thing I can have is somebody kind of challenging me. And I don't think that's a natural tendency for most of the people I talk to. It's a natural tendency of mine, but I love it when it comes back and I get challenged.
What is a fear that you have right now?
Whew. Wow. Well, I look at both my so if I look at I'll take a business right now that I have, which is Time Zest, and what we have put such incredible efforts for the last 2 years into this business. But when you build a software company, it could take just one of the big competitors in this space to write the right code. It could take one technical failure on our end. And I feel hyper confident in all these areas, but I just know that, like anything, the investment, time, energy, and growth that we put into this business, it's always like, I don't want to lose that. And there's always this, but that fear is also exactly what allows us. And we work so intentionally in saying, what are we fearful of and how do we mitigate that fear? Which is a wonderful thing. So the funny thing is, like, you have to examine, I think, sometimes when you get fearful, particularly around business or anything, is like, how realistic is that fear? Is that come from just you and self? And I don't broadcast myself as a fearful person, but like everybody, I've got a ton of it in there. Everybody does, right? I mean, if you dig deep enough, it's there. It's somewhere in there, and it's a healthy thing. So that's that. I would say that's one of my fears, is that we make some misstep that I'm not seeing right now, and it costs us this incredible amount of work and great energy that we put into this thing.
Tim Ferriss has a great exercise on fear setting, or I think of it like a pre-mortem. So document the fears today and talk about them and get them out there. What we often find is that fear is a function of a story in your head for a future event that has yet to occur, probably won't occur, but it's triggering for you something inside that creates that anxiety that we often feel. So just liberating yourself by expressing it, being aware that you're just telling yourself a story about it, and most importantly, the actions that you take are driven by a plan that's associated with the fear, as you said, that you're trying to mitigate. And so it's a very natural feeling. I appreciate you sharing that. And I think there's some really effective ways to approach it.
Yeah, that's great. Absolutely.
Cool.
It's what you just said is not unlike why I wrote the book. Like, you can
totally
like read it. It'll probably speak to anybody who's ever thought about selling their business, and it's going to identify some of their fears. Yeah. It's also going to walk you through an experience share of like how it could come to play out in a way that may resolve some of those anxieties. So that's great. I love that.
Jamison, we're excited about the emotional side of selling your small business, which is coming out when, by the way?
It is out now.
Okay. So on Amazon?
It's on Amazon.
Okay. Yeah. Terrific. We'll put that in the show notes. And thank you for sharing about what you're doing at ConnectStrat and the impact that you're making in the industry, and the guidance and the mentorship and the structure and the framework and the operating system that you're trying to bring to business owners to give them more understanding and control of the levers of this thing that they're building, which is designed to free them to lead the life that they want. Oftentimes becomes a great burden, or the shackles that keep them from achieving their dreams. And I appreciate you helping them break out. You're a great friend. I appreciate everything that you're doing with us. You're a great counselor, and I can't wait to see you in Orlando in a couple of weeks.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamison. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you next time on the Stride to Freedom podcast. Have a good day. Bye.